We have been getting a fair amount of questions around budget recently. So in this video, I'm going to walk through a simplified process we use to think about budget, CPA, and ROAS targets, and an AI tool we built that spits out these numbers for you. And before we talk about the math and calculation for how you should set your budget, it's important to consider how you even think about budget, because it's not as straightforward as, let's say, a grocery budget. So imagine you meet a younger version of yourself at the park. They are standing in front of a strange machine where every single time they put in $1, it gives them back $2. But here is the thing. You, or the younger version of you, only brought with you $5 in total that day. So after making $10 in total from the machine, the younger version of you walks away from the machine. So naturally, you go up and ask and say, "Why did you stop?" And the younger version of you says, "Because that was my budget." And in this scenario, what would you say in response to the younger version of you? You would probably say something like, "Why are you stopping? Use what you just got back, keep feeding the machine, and get as much as you can out of it over and over again." And that is how I think about budget when it comes to e-commerce and performance marketing, because in performance marketing and what we do with ads, budget can be a very misleading word. It can make it sound like and give you the impression that you are deciding on a limit, something that you're willing to risk, potentially a number that you shouldn't go past. However, if the machine is working for you, where you are putting in $1 and you are getting back $2 or even $1.10, what happens very quickly is that budget, the number that you pulled and decided was a limit, actually is no longer the constraint. Because in our world, the actual constraint that is most challenging to solve is performance, which is the machine, and getting it to spit out more than you put in, or at least getting back what you put in the time that you need it. The constraint isn't actually the budget or the number that we decided on just because it feels right or because it's what we're willing to risk. And this is why I don't set budgets based on what I'm spending alone. I also set them based on what I want to make, and then I work backwards. As an example, let's say I want to make $500 a day in contribution margin, which is the margin that is left over after your variable costs and your advertising. So it's what I have left over to cover my fixed expenses like my software and my app fees and my team and my own profit. And for the sake of example, the thing that I'm selling is an AOV or a price of $100. The cost of that is 30%. And this is going to be all of my costs. Again, the variable costs, so the actual cost of goods, the fulfillment costs, the 3PL, the transaction fees, the pick, pack, and ship, which leaves me with a gross profit per order of $70. And if I want to make 20% of contribution margin on each sale, that leaves me with an allowable cost per acquisition of $50 that I can spend on marketing to get the margin that I want to earn. Knowing these numbers of what I'm making or what I want to make in contribution margin per order, knowing what my allowable cost per acquisition is, and then knowing what I want to make each day, we are able to figure out what budget makes sense. If we put in some extra considerations, my goal here is $500 a day. And when it comes to the number of conversions that I need to earn that $500 a day in contribution margin, I can take the 500 and divide it by the contribution margin that I plan to earn, or historically that I know I earn per order, which is going to be 25 orders in this case, or 25 conversions, and the budget that I can set that would allow for this to happen, I can take my conversions that I'm going to need to yield that revenue that brings me to my contribution margin target, and I can multiply that by the allowable cost per acquisition. So the daily budget in this case would be $1,250. This process that we just worked through is a simplified version of how it is that we land on budget. It's not a number that we determine based on feel. It's a number that makes the outcome of what we're going after, in this case, $500 a day in contribution margin, possible. It's kind of like meal prepping or planning around your protein requirements. If you have to hit 100 grams of protein per day, you don't guess your way there. You work backwards. You may start with 30 grams of chicken in the morning, and then 40 grams from eggs at lunch if you work at home and you can cook from home like I do in the afternoon. And then you might get another 30 grams from beans and beef at night, totaling 100. The ingredients and the portions don't come from feeling or vibes. They come from the goal of what you need to hit, which is the same with your ad spend. You don't guess how much you want to spend. You define what you want to walk away with, and then you fund it accordingly. And even more important than that, there's a nuance that makes it more sophisticated than, let's say, your grocery budget, where you don't really spend your marketing dollars all at once the way you do at the grocery store, where you pay everything as a lump sum and then the money is gone. Especially the way we do things with our bidding selection, which you can learn more about in this video over here. Instead, with advertising, you deploy your budget over time. You gather feedback, you adjust based on the feedback, where you spend some money, you see what happens, and then you decide, do you invest more or not, even when you're setting daily budgets. It's not like buying an iPhone where you spend $1,000 and the money disappears into Apple's bank account. Instead, you spend a portion of your daily budget, and it may produce some returns for you that you can get back relatively quickly. And then you can use that information to make further decisions in cycles, not just in one sitting. It's not a fixed commitment. Instead, you can look at it like a dynamic investment strategy, which is why there's a little bit of sophistication here, where the question isn't just what's my budget, but the question is also, what do I want to earn and take away from working on this advertising? And the question is also, how do I structure the spend in a way that makes my goals reasonable and possible without overextending myself or my business? Because once that's clear, just like we have over here with the numbers that we did, the budget reveals itself. So that's the thinking behind budget and why it can be a tricky topic to wrap our heads around. And now we can get further into the tactics of calculating budget as well, which is easiest to do using the AI tool that we built called Budget Buddy, which is available to all of our members, and you can access it, and all of our other tools that we use in our systems to scale to $3,000 a day in sales using the trial link in the description below. But you always have the option to do this math on your own without our tool. All you need to do to get started is to click this button, and then it'll spit out some instructions for you, which are pretty simple. And that is for you to enter your average order value and your cost of delivery. As a refresher, your average order value is what you collect in dollar amounts on average from customers. And then your cost of delivery is everything it costs to deliver an order, like your product costs, your shipping, your fulfillment, and your transaction fees. In this case, what we'll do is we'll do an example of $100, nice and round, and we'll do a cost of delivery of 30, which gives a gross margin of 70%. What it outputs for us is a few important numbers based on the contribution margin that you want to earn per order. You can identify your allowable CPA, which is how much you can spend per conversion. From there, we like starting budgets of at least 10 times your allowable CPA because of two different things. The first thing is it allows Meta to get enough data to stabilize and optimize for you when it comes to its machine learning. And Meta has documentation over here that recommends setting budgets to allow for at least 50 conversions per week. And in our case, because we set things at 10 times the allowable CPA at minimum, it allows for at least 70 conversions per week. So we're on the safer side. The second reason is because in direct consumer, we typically don't have very large average order values. And by large, I'm talking about $5,000 transactions, where one transaction can be quite meaningful in covering a lot of your fixed expenses when it comes to your team, software, apps, and so forth. Instead, with direct to consumer, our average order values are somewhere between, let's say, $30 to $300. And so because of that, we have to have a lot of volume of transactions in order to cover all of your fixed expenses and to make it worth your while in building the business. So your rent, your team, your software, your apps, your own profit. The only way to really make that happen is to have a volume of transactions. Because as an example, if the contribution margin that you're earning per $100 sale is only $20 and you've set your budget at, let's say, only $100, there's only really going to be enough room for you to make maybe 2 conversions per day. And if your software, your team, your profit goals exceed that daily amount, then you're just not going to get where you need to go. It's unrealistic to set it too low. And how you counter, or rather how you manage the risk around budgets being perceived to be too high or for your comfort level is, in my experience and in my preference, is you choose the right bidding strategies, which again, you can see more of in this video over here. That's also on YouTube. Going back to the example with the AOV here of 100 and cost of delivery of 30, the starting budget ranges between $400 a day and $600 a day, depending on either your historical contribution margin number that you're able to back out to or what you're forecasting. And what the tool allows you to do is you can see not just your allowable CPA, but also your ROAS targets so that you can look at your metrics inside of your ad platform or your third-party attribution software. And you can use it to keep a pulse on how efficient your marketing is. And by that, I don't mean your structure of your marketing setup and your campaign setup, but more so the efficiency of your marketing material and whether it's hitting these KPI numbers for you to hit your daily goals. Now that it knows what our cost of delivery is and our AOV is, and it's giving us some starting points for budget, you can also follow up and ask a question such as, what if I want to make $500 per day in contribution margin? Then you can let it do its thing, and it'll give you the budget that you can set that would allow for the number of conversions, allowable CPA, ROAS, and revenue that makes sense for your margin target. In this case, at a 20% contribution margin, as an example, it would require a budget of $1,250, just like in the spreadsheet that we did earlier, to yield the $500 a day in contribution margin. And that would back out to a daily revenue of $2,500, which is very clarifying because it demystifies how many conversions you realistically need to look for in order to earn the number that you need to cover your profit and your expenses. And below, we just have a non-tabulated version of the same numbers so that if tables are a little bit daunting, you have the bullet pointed list that makes it easy to read however you'd like. All right, as a recap, for you to figure out your budget, you need to know a few things that you need to decide. One of them is how much do you actually want to make? The next thing is how much you're selling your stuff for. The one after that is how much that stuff costs you to fulfill. And then the fourth thing is how much margin you're aiming for on every sale that you're making. And then the fifth one is going to be how many daily conversions it's going to take for that to happen, which our tool does for you very simply and very quickly, especially if you aren't a numbers person or a math person. Once you have this information, you can do the math or use a tool to figure out what your daily budgets are. And if you want to try out this tool and our other tools, check the first link in the description below for a trial to the entry-level tier of our program. And now that you know how to choose your budget, you should watch this video next that goes over choosing your bid strategy, which is the next most important thing if you want to reduce your risk with these budgets.